Hi, everybody. Will Horniak, storyteller, with some stories about the Tualatin River and things that you and I can do to help the Tualatin River and the watershed remain healthy and clean for us, for people, but also for fish and for birds and the wildlife that live in and around the Tualatin River watershed. I want to thank my sponsors for the program today, the Tualatin Basin Partners for Clean Water. They have done a wonderful job over many, many years of educating and inspiring people to be good caretakers of the Tualatin River. And they're a good example, they're a very good example of people who help to speak up on behalf of the rivers and streams and the watershed. Because our Tualatin River needs our voice. We have to speak up on behalf of the river. Um, and here's an example of a wonderful myth. A myth is a story. It's a story I say that's not true on the outside, but it's true on the inside. And it's a story from the Nez Perce tribe. And the important thing here is just to realize that even a small voice can make a big, big difference if we speak up. At your school now, I'm sure you probably have a recycling program. You didn't have that 25 or 30 years ago, but you have it now because people have spoken up on behalf of the environment, on behalf of the earth. Well, the Nez Perce tribe, they say that long, long ago, all the animal people gathered because they had to decide how long the day was going to be and how long the night was going to be. And the coyote people came, the mallard duck people came, the mole people came, all the people gathered. But of course, the first one to speak was Grizzly Bear because he was always the first one to speak, you know. And this huge grizzly bear got up and he said, I want 6 months day and 6 months night. Well, nobody really wanted 6 months a day and 6 months a night, but of course nobody really wanted to argue with who, right? Grizzly Bear. So everybody just sort of said, okay, I guess we could make that work. No problem, Mr. Bear. Everybody said that, except for one tiny little frog. Can you imagine a little frog looking up at a grizzly bear? But frogs are very small, but of course, frogs have big voices. You know, if you've ever been near a pond or a river and heard frogs croaking, they have big voices. And this little frog, he just looked up at Grizzly Bear and he said, mm-mm. One day, one night. 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 And Bear looked around. He couldn't even see this frog. He looked and looked, and finally he looked way down. Hmm. And he said, no, no, no. 6 months day, 6 months night. But Frog said, mm-mm. One day, one night. One day, one night. One day, one night. 6 months day, 6 months night. Mm-mm. One day, one night. Well, Bear just got louder, you know. 6 months day. One day, one night. One day, one night. 6 months day, 6 months. One day, one night. One day. 6 months. One day, one night. One day, one night. One day, one night. One day, one night. Well, they kept arguing. And Bear, he just kept getting louder and louder and louder. You know, 6 months day, 6 months night, six. One day, one night. One day, one night. One day, one night. Well, finally the bear shouted so loud, 6 months, months, day. And he shouted for so long, 6 months, no, no, no. He lost his voice. And Frog just looked up and said, one day, one night. Well, the grizzly bear, he was so tired he just went way off into the mountains. And up there he slept and he slept and he slept about 6 long months. But that little frog just kept speaking up. And so, ever since that day, well, you watch Bear every wintertime goes to sleep for a long, long time. But all the rest of us, we just have one day, one night, one day, one night, one day, one night. Let's thank the great Nez Perce tribe for that wonderful story. But let's also remember that you don't have to have a big, big, big voice to make a big difference, but you do have to speak up. So remember, do what you can. Speak up on behalf of the great Tualatin River watershed, on behalf of clean water and rivers and streams and habitat for fish and for wildlife. And I want to thank you for letting me speak up a little bit to you today. Thanks for listening, everybody.